Hello, book lovers. Welcome to Must Love Books. Hello, book lovers. Welcome back to Must Love Books. Today, I am here with an author, Lyra Selene. Lyra was born under a full moon and has never quite managed to wipe the moonlight out of her eyes. She grew up on a steady diet of mythology, folklore, and fantasy, and now writes tall tales of twisted magic, forbidden love, and brooding landscapes. She lives in New England with her husband, daughter, and dog in an antique farmhouse that's probably not haunted. She is the author of YA duology Amber Dusk. Her adult debut, A Feather So Black, is releasing today. So hello, Lyra.
Hi, Krystle. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here and congratulations. Happy release day.
Thank you. It's been such a long road to get here, so I'm really thrilled to see this book go out into the world and find its readers. And I just can't wait to hear what everyone thinks of it.
Well, I am so happy that you are here today and I cannot wait to check out your new book. Why don't you go ahead and tell us what it's about?
So, in a world without magic, Thea is a changeling who has been abandoned in the human realms from the folk realms, which where the gates have now been closed. She is despised for her fair folk blood, but instead of treating her as an outcast, the queen raises her as a weapon and a spy in order to someday bring back her daughter, who was stolen away by the fair folk at the same time that Thea was left with her. So the beginning of this story starts when Thea and her childhood friend, Prince Rogan, embark on a mission to the Fairfolk realms in order to rescue the Princess Ayla. But she is cursed to the form of a swan by day and only regains her true form at night. Thea is also given a secondary mission to retrieve an object of great magical power in order to bring back to her mother, the queen, in order to rescue their realm. There is complex family dynamics, there's adventure, there's magic, and there's a lot of very angsty romance. So if that is your thing, then be sure to check this book out.
I heard angsty romance and I am in.
There will never be a book that I personally write that doesn't have some good angsty romance.
And that's what we're here for. It is. We're here for it.
It's so
So,
true.
can you tell us about some of your writing inspirations for A Feather So Black?
Yeah, so primarily I was inspired for this particular book. It is a bit of a loose Swan Lake retelling or reimagining. So that was one of my primary inspirations. It's not technically a fairy tale, although it has sort of entered the folklore as if it were one. It is actually a ballet. And for those of you who aren't familiar with it, the basic outline is that a princess is cursed to the form of a swan by a shadowy sorcerer. A prince comes to rescue her, but before he can pronounce his true love for her, the Black Swan character sort of tricks him into believing that she is the woman he loves. He professes his love to her instead, and then she dies of a broken heart. So I have always been fascinated. I love the ballet, but I've always been fascinated by the story, and in particular, the Black Swan character. It's never been clear to me who she is and why she does what she does, why she sort of ruins this prince and this princess their happy ending. I started digging really deeply into this story. Tchaikovsky himself was inspired by a number of European myths and legends, some of them Irish. You have the Seven Swans is a big one. There are a number of these swan related myths that all have their basis in Swan Lake. it was always unclear to me who the Swan Princess is in relation to the Black Swan. So that was when I first started writing this years ago. That was my jumping off point. I wanted to write a Swan Lake reimagining from the perspective of the Black Swan, to really examine who she is to the Swan Princess, who we're all familiar with, who she is to this shadowy sorcerer who has cursed these maidens as swans, why in the end she takes away this happy ending from these people and turns it into a tragedy. So that was my primary inspiration. And from there, I also was really inspired by the mythology and folklore of Ireland. I really have always felt a deep kinship to it. So I wanted to draw on that when writing this book and really pay homage to Celtic mythology and the Gaelic language and the really beautiful traditions and mythology that exist in Ireland.
That is so beautiful. I love that so much. And so, tying back to how you discuss your homage to Irish stories, you lived in Ireland for a little bit. I would love to hear more about this.
When I was about 10, my parents, who have also always really loved Irish culture and have felt really close to our Irish roots, decided to move with me and my younger siblings to Ireland. And we moved to this incredibly rural area, all countryside, sheep and villages, and very, very rural compared to the suburban American lifestyle that we had left behind. And it was a bit of a culture shock, but for me at that age, I was already a huge reader, and I loved fantasy. And there was something about the landscape and the mythology that I was learning in school, and some of the books that I was picking up that I hadn't encountered in the US, that was so inspirational for me. And it just really like inflamed my imagination, and I was really left to my own devices a lot of the time, and I would go out wandering over the moors and like making friends with wild ponies and like scrambling up and down muddy hills, like all by myself, just imagining fairies in the bushes and imps in the woods. And we only lived there a year, but it was such an incredible time for me. It was sort of the end of childhood, but before I became a teen. And I felt like I was really able to immerse myself in the spirit of the landscape, and also some of that really new folklore and mythology that I was being exposed to.
That is absolutely amazing. Of course, you wrote a beautiful fairy tale. You essentially spent a year living in a fairy tale yourself.
Yes.
So, how about you walk us through how you took your inspiration and turned it into this beautiful book? What was your writing process like?
Yeah, I mean, it's always hard to sort of identify these moments of when an idea becomes real, when, like some of these things I've been thinking about literally since I was, 11 years old. For this book in particular, I started writing it while I was on submission with my first book that sold, my YA book. And I wanted to go in a really different direction with it. And this was, again, the sort of Swan Lake told via Celtic mythology was something that was in the back of my head, but that I really hadn't fully decided what it was going to be about, what the book was going to look like, what the plot or characters would be. So I wrote that first version years ago. It was probably about 2015 or 2016. And it wasn't right. I sent it to a critique partner and she was like, well, not sure where you're going with this one. And it's always hard to hear that as a writer, but at the same time, it's good to know when a story idea just isn't quite there yet. So I wound up focusing on other projects. I wound up selling that book, Amber Dusk, and then writing its sequel. I came back to it another time, tried to rewrite it, still couldn't get it right. I sent it to my agent and she said, nah, I don't think I can sell this one. So yet again, I trumped it. And then in 2020, a few things sort of happened. The pandemic hit, as everyone knows. I also had my first child, and I also parted ways with my first agent. So there was a lot of turmoil just generally in my life. And I actually wasn't sure whether I was going to keep writing. I hadn't sold any more books, and I was feeling creatively a little backed up. I just couldn't quite figure out what I wanted to do. And I remember sort of in this period of turmoil, I wound up totally from scratch, picking this story idea back up. And just for fun, just for myself, totally taking a different angle with it, I just started rewriting it. And it really was a joy. It was something that felt like it was just for me. It was this story that I've been passionate about for years, but just couldn't quite get right. And this time I was really able to dig into something deeper and more authentic in myself, and also I think in the lives of the characters in the story. And it just flowed out of me in such a beautiful way that I was able to really, I think, rekindle my love for writing with this story. So it feels so right that this is sort of my second act as an author, to come back to publishing with this book in particular, because it really is the book of my heart. And it took me so long to get it right. But in a way, I'm really grateful for that journey, because I think had I been able to publish an earlier version, it wouldn't have been this book. And I'm so glad that it's this book and I got it right. And I really just love it so much.
And that really just goes to show that, sometimes just because you get that rejection and, the book that you want to sell isn't picked up, it doesn't mean that it's over. It doesn't mean it's done. And I love that you were able to, take that old idea that has always been a part of you and always kind of playing in the back of your mind and just continue reworking it until you figured out how to tell the story and what story you wanted to tell. And now we have this. I mean, if you were picked up earlier with the earlier novel, as you said, this one wouldn't exist. It wouldn't be here.
Exactly. And I think it's such a lesson in trust, about the process, about the journey. Whenever I talk to other writers who are maybe struggling with their own journey, or feeling like they're not getting there as fast as they want to get there, I always say that the only way to fail at your dreams is to give up on them. Sometimes things take time and you can't predict how that's going to end up. You really can't. And so I do love that this book really taught me to have patience in that journey, and to really have trust that it will all work out the way that it's supposed to.
That is beautiful and such a good and uplifting message for authors and those who want to become authors to really focus on, have patience, trust the process. This is the epitome of trust the process.
Yes.
And, don't give up, always persevere. The number one thing that you need when it comes to publishing is perseverance. It is the most important trait that you have to be able to develop and allow yourself to push through and keep working and keep improving and just keep trying.
Absolutely.
So, what are you working on next? Do you have any future ideas that you are working on? Is there going to be more to A Feather So Black? What can we expect to see from you?
Yes, so A Feather So Black is book one in a trilogy. So I have just finished a first revision on book two. I sent that through to my editor. I am so excited about book two. Book twos are always really challenging, and this one was, but it's now at the point where I can see the forest for the trees. And I think that for people who love A Feather So Black, it's going to be such a great next chapter in Fia's story. There's a lot to that I love about it that I hope that everyone else will love about it. So it's been a lot of hard work, but a lot of fun to continue that story. And I am now just about to start drafting book three as well. So there's a lot to look forward to in this particular series. And I've got some other, story ideas in progress that I'm not quite allowed to talk about yet, but hopefully a lot of good things to come in the future. Not the near future, because everything in publishing takes a million years, but in the future.
That is one downside to the publishing industry is it seems like everything goes so slowly.
It does. And I think there's good reason for that because it does take a lot of time to write a good book. And there, are many rounds of revision and many editorial reasons for that. But yeah, sometimes both as a reader and a writer, it can feel frustrating with how slowly publishing moves. But I think it's probably in the end for the best.
Now, so A Feather So Black is going to be a trilogy. When you started writing the first one, did you already have plans for a trilogy? Are you kind of playing it by ear? Do you work with, detailed outlines? Do you have a full story in your mind when you start writing? How do you go about this?
So when I started writing this version, I did not know whether it would be a standalone or the first in a series. That was something that when I got to the end, even I was like, well, I can see how this could be wrapped up, or I can see how it could continue. So when I spoke with the acquiring editor at Orbit, who is my publisher, it was something that we discussed at length, and she was fine either way, but she wanted to make sure that I knew whether the story was going to continue. And if I wanted it to continue, she definitely wanted me to have a clear idea of what the full shape of the 3-book arc was going to be. So, I talked it over with my critique partners, my agent, my editor, and we all decided to have it be 3 books instead of just one. And I'm really, really glad that we decided to do that because as I've continued with Thea's next chapter, it has deepened and broadened both the world and her character development. And I'm really excited with the total shape of the story. I do know, pretty much what's going to happen throughout all 3 books. Maybe not every single detail, but the general shape of the story I do know. And so that's really fun to sort of break it down into its individual stages, its individual books, but to also really have a sense of where you're going, how you're going to get there, and to see that play out in the books is really satisfying in a way.
Personally, I am a huge fan of trilogies. I am always a sucker for a trilogy, honestly. I I don't know what it is about them. I just love the overall arc. Each story has its own arc, but then the overriding arc of a trilogy. And maybe it just comes from watching so much of the original Star Wars trilogy as a kid, but I am always here for a good trilogy.
I think there is something about the hero's journey that plays out really well over three installments, whether it's Star Wars or Lord of the Rings. I think we have some really iconic and classic trilogies that that arc does feel really satisfying. I think to have each book be self-contained, but also be part of a broader, bigger story. It's a really fun way to experience that element of storytelling, I think.
I absolutely agree. So your first books was a young adult duology, and now you're
Mhm.
writing this adult trilogy. How do you navigate and what inspired you to jump from YA into adult fiction?
That's a great question. I think there is part of my heart that will always live with YA. I grew up reading so many amazing YA books and still to this day read YA books. I think it is one of the most special genres in terms of exploring those coming of age stories that I think everyone can relate to. And I think there's so much room to explore so many elements of character within that I think it's especially in the past 10, 15 years, it's been somewhere where some of the most exciting things in literature, in my opinion, are happening. Love YA, will always love YA. I think with this book in particular, when I wrote it, as I mentioned, I was in a little bit of a different headspace, and it just came out a little darker, a little older, a little more mature. I think the themes are a little more mature. The romance is definitely a little bit more mature. And I think that was just a natural, it was just what the story called for. And it was something that I spoke with my agent about. I wondered whether I should, try to make the characters a little younger to have it be suitable for YA, or whether I should, and she was like, no, if the story calls for it to be adult, then it's adult. It was sort of an organic, it wasn't intentional on my part. It was just the story that called for a little bit more of an adult tone. It's not to say that I will stay an adult forever or that I'll never return to YA. As I said, I think YA is such a beautiful genre, and there's a lot of flexibility these days in terms of crossovers between YA and adult. I think the lines have definitely blurred. I know new adult isn't technically a genre, but there are a lot of books that fall into that, in my opinion. So yeah, I think I'll take it book by book and project by project and kind of go along with what the story demands of me, to be honest.
That's one great thing about being an author too, is you don't have to actually limit yourself to one style of writing or one genre or one type of storytelling. There is absolutely nothing preventing us from branching out and exploring different genres and exploring different styles and, write what you love.
Absolutely. And I think it can be really easy to get boxed in sometimes either by yourself or maybe by feeling like your readers want something in particular from you. But I think we are creating art and it has to come from the heart or else it won't be authentic. And I think that means that you have to sort of follow what the story demands, what the project wants from you, and also what you want to write. And that may be wildly different from anything you've done before. I think it's a good thing. To become comfortable is to become complacent, in my opinion. So I hope to always be pushing myself to try new things, try new genres, push myself, past the boundaries I've set for myself. Because I think that's how it stays fresh and exciting, and that's how you find your own joy in the art you create.
And I think that's something that I'm seeing a lot more of lately with authors exploring different genres and really stepping outside of the box that they are known for and, what kind of got their name out there. It's something that I'm just seeing as more and more common within the last few years is authors broadening their genres.
Absolutely. I'm a huge fan of Leigh Bardugo, and obviously I loved her Grisha trilogy, Six of Crows, these amazing YA fantasy books. But then her new adult fantasies have been incredible too, and completely different in so many ways. And I love that range, both as a reader, and it's inspirational to me as a writer too, to really say, okay, you don't have to box yourself in. You don't have to say, I'm this kind of writer or that kind of writer. You can do anything you set your mind to. And that's really inspirational to me.
So, for our listeners who are not familiar with your YA duology, can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, I'd love to. It is set in a world where the sun never sets. It was loosely inspired by the court of the Sun King at Versailles under Louis XIV. I was doing a lot of research just sort of for my own fun, and I was really fascinated by all of the social structures and norms that Louis XIV used to control his nobility. That fashion and decorum and manners were tools that were used to keep his aristocracy under his thumb. And that combined with just the lavish, gilded Versailles royalty really took off in my head. And the books are about a young woman named Sylvie who grew up in the Dusk Lands, or the sort of desert area where the sun doesn't really shine. And she travels to the glittering heart of the Amber Empire in order to claim a birthright that she believes she is owed. But of course, when she gets to the court of the Amber Empress, not everything is as it seems. There are scheming nobles and deadly magic and many plots afoot, lots of palace intrigue that she has to navigate. So it's definitely a different tone from this book. There's lots of palace intrigue, lots of political intrigue. I really love it. It's my debut novel and its sequel. So it's something that I love talking about. It feels like it was a long time ago now, even though it was only 2018. It's definitely a different vibe from this book, but I think there are a lot of maybe thematic follow-throughs that a reader of this book might also enjoy in those books.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So we are going to go ahead and wrap up today. Thank you so much for joining us today. And once again, congratulations. Happy release day for A Feather So Black. I am so excited to pick it up and to discover this kind of Irish mythology Swan Lake retelling.
Thank you so much. It's been such a journey, and it's been so fun speaking to you about the writing process and all of my inspirations. And I hope when you do pick up the book that you love it as much as I loved writing it.
Excellent. And I will be sharing all of your social media links on the episode description, as well as the Must Love Books podcast Instagram and Facebook pages. So for any of our listeners that want to find you, we will absolutely show everyone the right direction to get to you. And again, please check out A Feather So Black, releasing today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. This has been Must Love Books. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Patreon under @Must Love Books Podcast. Thank you and happy reading.